There are three things that you have to get right in your business. Who's the right client? What is the right value proposition? The clarity of your value proposition drives everything. And what is the right exchange of value? What does the client receive, and what do you derive in return?
The title of tonight's show, Conversational Selling, where relationships matter, so too do conversations. First, I open by saying, hello, Norm. How are you today?
I'm well, and it's great to be with you as always, Yitzchok. Thank you.
Amazing. So I'm going to open up conversational selling. Intriguing. Can you share with our audience, what do you mean by conversational selling?
Where relationships matter, so too do conversations. Conversational selling addresses how you have meaningful conversations that lead to a positive outcome for everyone. High-performing salespeople recognize that in every sales interaction, there are three conversations. The first is me to me. The second is me to you. And the third is you to you. High-performing salespeople recognize that it all starts with mindset. One of the interesting aspects of our work, literally with thousands of high-performing salespeople, is that high-performing salespeople are driven to make a difference. Money is a measure of their success. They are focused on the other person, what is meaningful to them. In the me to you conversation, they communicate that intent. They make it about the other person. They recognize that people buy products or services. They buy an experience, not products or services.
Okay.
And they're there to find out what's important to that other person. And that really comes back to the you to you conversation. They start with what's important to that individual, their needs, their wants, their values. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
One of the ways in which we met was through originally David Simkowitz, one of the top financial advisors in the tri-state area, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. David is a master of the conversational environment. David works with some of the wealthiest individuals and families in the tri-state area. When David goes to meet a prospective client, he focuses on what's important to them. He engages in a conversation to learn about their needs, their wants, their values. David's told me that sometimes they schedule an hour-long conversation and they end up in a 3 to 4 hour dialogue because they both become so engaged. And then David does something very interesting. At the end of that conversation, he says, if you're like most of the successful people with whom we work, and I believe you are, before you make an important decision, you seek out the advice or counsel of others. Is that a fair statement? And generally speaking, the other person nods. And David says, would you mind my asking, who are those people? Would you mind if I went and met with those people? Because what they will provide is perspective on your perspective. They will help us make a more informed decision about what is in your best interest. Does that seem reasonable? High performers always ask checking questions. They always ask affirming questions to ensure that the other person is engaged. But typically, the prospective client will say, of course, and then David will go to meet those other people to whom they turn for advice or counsel. And when he goes, he is there to be learning and to be informed, and where appropriate, to inform and counsel. It is an interactive, collaborative decision. David recognizes that when people make decisions, they are most comfortable with their conclusions, not ours. And so he draws out the conclusions of those other professionals. And when he goes back with his solution, it is collaborative. He has drawn upon the expertise and the counsel of those other people who serve that important individual. Now, what's interesting about that is I was in a conversation with one of our clients who is the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar business. We work with some of the wealthiest family-owned businesses in North America. And the CEO of this business said to me, Norm, the problem with most of my advisors is that they see our business and our family through the lens of how they make money. And what I'd like them to do is to look at the totality of our situation. See, one of the challenges is you have to differentiate between two voices that the client hears. The first is a vendor voice. You're trying to sell them something. The second is an advisor voice. You're providing advice or counsel. They will make their own determination. David Simkowitz speaks in an advisor voice. That's what differentiates.
We're speaking with Norm Trainor, the founder and CEO of the Covenant Group. Norm, there are many different types of training programs out there, different approaches to selling. How does conversational selling differ from the other approaches?
Well, there are many great sales training programs out there, and certainly I've benefited from a significant number of them. When you ask a high performer what makes them successful, they will readily tell you. When you observe what makes them successful, a high-performing salesperson in particular, it is not what they tell you. Most high-performing salespeople tend to focus on their sales skills, their product technical knowledge, their expertise in a chosen area, the quality of their network. All of those things are important, Yitzchok. That is not what differentiates them. The single most important differentiator between high performers and average producers is the time frame or time span within which they plan and work. In other words, high performers plan their work and work their plan very differently. That relates to the longest task in which they're involved and the way in which they manage short, complex tasks. Now, one of the things that high performers recognize is that they're playing a long game. They're building a business, and that the most important form of marketing or building your brand is word of mouth. That's how we met.
That's right.
So they recognize that they're building relationships for life. That's number one. But the second thing is that high-performing salespeople understand that you have to manage the before, the during, and the after of a sales interaction. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
One of our clients, his name is Darcy McConvey, is one of the top real estate investment advisors in North America. And Darcy's actually in the same Business Builder Playbook program in which you're involved.
Yep.
And in that program, it expands a year. And every month we have an educational workshop. And in each of those workshops, we focus on 1 to 3 takeaways. And about 6 months ago, the takeaway in the workshop that you were at and Darcy was at was the importance of your top 20 relationships. Yeah. In selling, generally speaking, what we find is salespeople have 20 relationships that if they manage them well, will drive 40 to 80% of their sales in the next 3 to 12 months. So we did a workshop on the top 20. And that afternoon, I got a text from Darcy saying, Norm, by the end of the year, I'm going to be on your top 20 relationships list. And I laughed at that. And in fact, Darcy now is on my top 20 relationships list. He's introduced a number of clients. Now, one of the things we know about selling is when you know how to open, you don't have to close. So it was interesting what happened when Darcy made those introductions. And I'll give you a specific example. Yes. This week, I got an email introduction from Darcy to a good friend of his who's a very successful financial advisor. And in the body of the email, Darcy said to his friend, don't be surprised if in the first 15 minutes of talking to Norm, you sign up to work with him. So Darcy's already planting the seed. So when people make decisions, they triangulate. They look for 3 or more sources to validate whether or not they should move forward. Typically, the first source is the opinion or what other people say. Best form of marketing is word of mouth. So Darcy's introduction speaks volumes to the people to whom we are introduced. Right. But the second form of triangulation today typically is people go to the internet. They Google you. And as you know, when people Google you, typically the first thing that comes up is your LinkedIn profile. And so people read your LinkedIn profile. Now, most people, when they write their LinkedIn profile, they do it as if it's a resume.
Right.
I did this, I did that. These are my accomplishments. When people read your LinkedIn profile, they don't want to know how great you are. They want to know how great you will make them.
True.
I learned that from Dr. Deborah Jasper, who is one of the foremost authorities on communication. You know Deborah and the power of what she does.
Yep.
In conversation with Deborah, one of the things that she highlighted for me is in conversations, words matter. In communication, words matter. So you always start out with the benefit to the client. And you do that in every form of communication, your website, your social media presence, the way you articulate what you do to people that matter. So the second form of triangulation is how you manage your presence on the internet, your website, social media. But the third form of triangulation is when people first meet you. And that's the next area we're going to drill down into.
Now, Norm, question. Before we even get to conversational selling, before the break, you mentioned that on one of the sites that you listed, you have a free download of one of your books. How many books have you written, or have you lost count already?
No, I've actually written or co-authored 7 books, and
Nice.
We're currently with Dr. Keita Deming, one of my colleagues, writing another book, which
Nice.
will be published in the next 3 to 4 months. So thank you for asking.
Of course. Well, let's go back to conversational selling. Tonight's topic is conversational selling, where relationships matter, so too do conversations. So can you describe in more detail how conversational selling leads to more sales? I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, it's all about making the sale. So conversational selling, it sounds great, it sounds intriguing, but how does it lead to more sales?
It's a great question. One of our guidelines in working with salespeople is when you know how to open, you don't have to close. There are 2 principles of influence. The first is focus on the other person. Make them the center of the experience. And the second is you earn the right to proceed. Buying is a series of micro decisions. And how you manage each of those conversations or decision points is critical to a successful outcome. So let me give you an example, Yitzchok. One of the advisors whom I've coached for a number of years is Dean Harder. Dean Harder is a leading advisor in the Midwest. Dean's 54 years of age, and his passion is working with people 5 to 15 years from retirement to help them retire financially secure. There are 3 things that you have to get right in your business. Who's the right client? What is the right value proposition? The clarity of your value proposition drives everything. And what is the right exchange of value? What does the client receive, and what do you derive in return? So for Dean, the right client is probably 45 to 60. Successful executive, earning a significant income, who wants to retire someday. The right value proposition is helping them retire financially secure and with complete peace of mind. When Dean meets someone who fits his ideal client profile and they're involved in a conversation, typically what will happen if they're meeting for the first time is that other person will say to Dean, "Dean, what do you do?" Now, most salespeople, when asked that question, most advisors, most professionals describe their solution. I'm a financial advisor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, I'm a consultant, I'm a real estate agent. People aren't interested in that. That's not what differentiates you. When Dean is asked that question,
Right.
He responds very differently. Dean says to the other person, "Thank you for asking. Before I answer that question, would you mind if I asked you a question?" Now, the universal people frequency is the other person. When you say that to someone, generally speaking, they're more than glad to respond because they'd much rather talk about themselves than listen to the other person. So generally speaking, the other person will say, "Sure." And Dean says, "Do you plan to retire someday?" Now, people answer in one of three ways. The first is, yeah, I can't wait. The second is, no, that's me. They're going to carry me out with my boots still on. And the third is, I don't know. And if people say, I don't know, it usually means they don't know whether they can afford to retire or not.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that that person says to Dean, yes, yeah, I plan to retire. Yeah. Dean will say to them, well, tell me, what's your retirement dream look like? And he'll ask a series of questions to find out what their aspirations are. What is their retirement dream? That conversation can go on for 2 minutes or 20 to 30 minutes.
Right.
And then generally what happens is the other person says, so Dean, tell me, what is it you do? And again, Dean says, thank you for asking. I love helping people. I love helping people like yourself, 5 to 15 years from retirement, move from the majority to the minority. You see, most people don't fully understand how everything has to come together perfectly so they can live their retirement dream. And if it doesn't come together perfectly, they're going to be disappointed. I would love to have coffee with you and show you how this works. Now, 9 to 10 times out of 10, the other person says, love to do that. And 8 to 10 times out of 10, they become a client. When you know how to open, you don't have to close.
Now, Norm,
yeah,
it was amazing. But, you're always so gracious in complimenting others. Tell us, because I know from our past conversations, you even discussed one time how when you're on an airplane, we don't travel that much these days, but when you're on a plane and they say, what's it, Mr. Trainor? Okay, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
I prior to the pandemic, I was on 80 to 120 flights a year because we work all over North America and internationally.
Right.
And when I got on a plane, typically the last thing I wanted to do was engage in a conversation with the person next to me. Not because I'm not relational, it's that I'm either going to a meeting or coming back from a meeting. So I either want to prepare or I want to kind of summarize my thoughts and notes and decompress. But I always greet the person beside me. And if they engage, I too will engage. And generally speaking, when we first have a conversation, it's small talk. And invariably, the other person will turn to me and say, Norm, what do you do? And I always respond the same way. I say, thank you for asking. Before I answer that question, what do you do? I've never had someone say, Norm, I asked you first. Because again, the universal people frequency is the other person. So they're more than glad to talk about themselves. And again, sometimes those conversations, they can talk for 25, 30, 40 minutes because I will ask follow-up questions. And what I'm really interested in is what's important to this individual. Now, if they are someone who fits our ideal client, they're an entrepreneur, they're an executive, they're in a sector or industry where we're quite involved, when they turn back to me and say, now, Norm, what do you do? I respond in this way. Thank you for asking. Helping our clients thrive is at the center of everything we do at the Covenant Group. We help our clients design the business that is right for them so they can leverage systems, processes, and approaches that drive revenue and meaningful results. Whether our clients are a business of one or of many, we focus on what matters so they can attain what matters. A successful and thriving business, a powerful legacy, fulfillment for themselves and the people around them. And without exception, people will say to me, how do you do that? When you know how to open, you don't have to close.
It's great. That is just great. My guest is Norm Trainor, the founder and CEO of the Covenant Group, and we're talking about conversational selling. In fact, tonight's topic is conversational selling, where relationships matter, so too do conversations. Click subscribe, and you'll be notified every time a new episode goes up. Norm, before the break, or actually, not only before the break, I believe you mentioned it during this show and in previous shows, you've always discussed how buying is a series of micro decisions. Can you please explain and build that out for the listeners?
Very much so. When we make a buying decision, there are a series of conversations that go on. And each conversation or each buying decision is a point in time, and how you manage each of those transitions, the micro decisions that people make, is fundamental to your success. I mentioned earlier that one of the differentiations between high-performing salespeople and average producers is that high performers manage the before, the during, and the after. One of the examples of that is the way in which you manage triangulation. You manage the before conversation. And I touched on earlier Darcy McConvey, that Darcy's become a great center of influence. He's become a key influencer. The conversations that Darcy has with people who fit our ideal client profile and whom he wants to introduce are critical to moving the buying decision forward. So generally speaking, when I have an initial conversation with a prospective client, they've already been in a conversation with someone who they know and respect. And that person has spoken highly of the experience they have with us. Now, one of the things we know about human behavior is people treat facts as factors and make decisions based on feelings. All decisions are emotionally based. And we also know that human beings are rationalizing rather than rational. In other words, we are judgmental. We make a judgment about people. And we do so typically in the first few minutes of meeting them. Sometimes those judgments are based on superficial criteria, the way someone dresses, their way of interacting, how they speak. So one of the things that's really important is to manage that initial interaction. When you triangulate in a positive manner, when someone like Darcy speaks highly of us, when they go to our LinkedIn profile and they say that speaks exactly to me, people come into that initial meeting with a very positive mind frame or mindset. And since they are rationalizing rather than rational, they're looking for qualities or attributes or things in the conversation that reinforce their already positive frame. So typically, with the people with whom we work, when they come to us, we have a 30-minute initial conversation. And generally speaking, my experience is, Yitzchok, that in 17 to 30 minutes, in a conversation that I have with a prospective client who's been introduced by someone like you or someone like Darcy, they make a decision that can be a 5-figure or 6-figure decision. And they make that decision because they've already come with a positive viewpoint. So if you manage your client attraction conversation well, if you know how to open, you don't have to close. Now, that's the first in a series of conversations that follow conversations that happen before we even meet. Once you've had that conversation and focused on them, the purpose of that client attraction conversation is to earn the right to proceed. 2 key elements in influencer selling: focus on the other person, make them the center of the experience, and earn the right to proceed. So generally speaking, when I'm introduced to someone and we set up that first 30-minute call, I call my nominator to find out about that other person. I will Google that other person to find out about them. There are 4 things that more than anything else make a difference when you first meet someone: what you know about them, the questions you ask, the stories you tell, and what you create together. So generally speaking, when someone comes on for a call, the first question I ask is, what would make this call valuable for you? And they usually tell me what will make it meaningful and that they're here to make a decision about whether they want coaching, they want to work with us. And that informs the discussion. But before I start describing what we do, the next thing I ask them is, would you take 5 to 10 minutes or whatever time you feel appropriate and tell me your story? And you could start anywhere. I'm really interested in learning more about you. Does that seem reasonable? And then people will go into it. And throughout that, I will take notes. And then when it comes back, what I'm looking to do is identify how we can help them achieve what's important to them. Now, after I find out their background, I'll then ask them, that's really helpful in terms of where you've been.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, where are you going? What's important to you? What do you want to achieve over the next 1, 5, 10 years or more? Those conversations, typically in a 30-minute conversation, my part is the last 3 minutes to describe what we do. That's what conversational selling is all about. You focus on the other person and you earn the right to proceed. Now, it doesn't just end there. The client attraction conversation will usually lead to a deeper discovery,
Right.
to presenting and obtaining commitment, to implementing and to follow up. So there are these series of conversations. And interestingly enough, one of the most important conversations is those or that one or ones you have after you make the sale. What's interesting about attracting the right clients is that often we think that the best way to attract the right clients is to focus on marketing, building our brand, and that is important. But where you start is with service. The clarity of your value proposition drives everything. And to the degree that people identify with what you do, they understand that you help them achieve what is important to them, what is aspirational. That's the key trigger to move forward and become a client. So when you integrate marketing, sales, and service, when you focus on the value you're going to bring to people or to clients, that makes all the difference. And that's the next subject we're going to touch on.
So, conversational selling, you touched on this, but maybe you could even just still explain it further. How does it help attract and solidify the right prospect and turn them into a client?
In a business, we create sustainability through attracting and retaining the right clients. The most important measure of the success of a business appears nowhere on the balance sheet, income statement, or cash flow statement. The most important measure of business success is client capital. Client capital is the sum of 3 elements. The first is the depth of relationship, the most important measure of which is the number of products and services people buy from you, or the degree to which they turn to you for advice or counsel in myriad areas of their lives. The second element is the breadth of relationship, the extent to which clients willingly introduce, recommend, and refer you. They become your advocates or your evangelists. And the third is the degree of engagement. One of the measures we use in business is client satisfaction. The challenge with that, although it is very important, is that satisfaction is ephemeral. It can wax and wane. Client engagement is the key measure. When your clients are engaged with you, they know you're committed to their success. As a consequence, they're committed to your success. That's why Darcy sent me that text saying, I'm going to be on your top 20 relationships list before the end of the year. So the way we manage those 3 aspects of client capital determine the degree of loyalty or attachment that clients have, the depth of relationship, the breadth of relationship, and the degree of engagement. And since the best form of marketing is word of mouth, when you do a good job of serving your clients, that will radiate. That becomes the most powerful form of marketing that you can put out there or convey.
My guest is Norm Trainor of the founder and CEO of the Covenant Group. How can people find out more about your great program?
Our website is www.covenantgroup.com. We also have another website, www.mybusinessbuilderacademy.com. It has case studies, videos. You can download one of my books, The Business Builder, free, a digital copy. You can also reach us through our North America-wide toll-free number, 1-877-903-3878. Our community manager is John Donnelly. His email is john@covenantgroup.com. If you email John, John will direct you to the appropriate resource, or one of his team members will direct you.
Norm, you shared with us that your organization, the Covenant Group, the mission is to help its clients achieve peak performance as they define it. How does conversational selling fit within your business definition?
Thank you for asking.
Yes.
One of our mantras is the narrower your focus, the bigger your opportunity. At the Covenant Group, as I mentioned, helping our clients thrive is at the center of everything we do. We work with you to design the business that is right for you, so you can leverage systems, processes, and approaches that drive revenue and meaningful results. Now, meaningful results mean different things for different people. Our target market typically is those people who are in an advisory role. Financial advisors, lawyers, accountants, consultants, real estate professionals, people in technology, anyone where relationships matter, so too do conversations. And when we work with clients, we too are involved in conversations. Generally speaking, when we work with people, they want one or more of four outcomes. The first is they want to build a successful business, generate more revenue, make more money. But often, as I said earlier, the underlying passion or drive is to make a difference. The second is they want to have more quality time. They want to work at the highest level of their capability. They want to optimize, to only do what only they can do. The third is they want to have more fun in their work. Many successful people are adrenaline junkies. They have cortisol or adrenaline flowing through their veins.
Tell me about it.
They act as if they're in survival mode. And that's not the most productive way to operate.
Yeah.
We have to move from surviving to thriving.
Yeah.
And the fourth is they want to achieve financial security and independence for themselves and for the people that are important to them and for their clients. So I mentioned earlier that one of the advisors with whom we work is Dean Harder. And Dean's a classic example of these four. When we started working with Dean, he was 48 years of age. Dean was already successful. Our clients are already successful. Like most high performers, they just want to get better. And for Dean, it wasn't so much about making more money because he wanted to improve his lifestyle necessarily. More money enabled he and his wife, Jackie, to make more of a difference. They are generous of spirit. They give to many causes, and he wanted to make more money so he could make a bigger difference. What was really important to him, though, was time. Both he and Jackie love the sun. They live in the Midwest. Today, Dean and Jackie are in Florida. Dean redesigned his business to make it meaningful for their life. He has worked remotely now for years. When the pandemic hit last year, he did not miss a beat. His business, in fact, last year was up over 30%. Wow. He has designed his business to work from Florida or from Indiana without interruption. So a key part of our work is designing the business with you that is right for you, and then putting in place systems, processes, and approaches that drive revenue and meaningful results. Now, let me give you another example. One of the advisors whom I've had the privilege of coaching for a number of years is Vince DeDonna. Vince is one of the leading planning and life insurance and financial advisors in the US. Vince, in fact, is in the Hall of Fame, the Estate Planning Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Vince has designed his business to work with other collateral professionals, particularly financial advisors. 80 to 90% of the business that Vince does in any given year is collaborations with other advisors. What Vince has mastered is conversations at a number of levels. For example, how the advisors with whom he works co-productively communicate the value that Vince brings.
Right.
Vince works with high net worth and ultra high net worth clients. Vince is one of the most successful life insurance advisors in the US. He has placed over $2 billion of permanent life insurance.
Wow.
The people that he works with, his clients, don't need life insurance in the traditional sense. They don't need it because if they die, their families will be financially destitute. Life insurance serves a different purpose. It assures that protection and transition of wealth multi-generationally. And Vince is the master of that conversation. Vince is able to work, as we touched on earlier, with a number of people with whom he has conversations to bring about a meaningful outcome for high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals and families.
Norm, as we wrap up the show, we have a new feature here now that we moved on to a brand new station with new reach, and that is we ask our guests to share something in 60 seconds or less that are related to their initials. So, of course, you are N for Norm, T for Trainor. You could pick either an N or a T, something, a great takeaway based on any of your initials.
Well, let's go back to where we started, that the best form of marketing is word of mouth. And
Right.
the conversations that matter most are the ones that occur before you actually engage in a conversation with
Right.
regard to the value you bring. So the N I would choose is networking, netweaving. Networking is based upon the premise, what can you do for me? Netweaving on the supposition, what can I do for you? When you find people in your social circle, in your network, in your life, and in your business that are both networkers and netweavers, it is transformative. You're a natural networker, netweaver. Darcy McConvey's a natural networker, netweaver. Dean Harder's a natural networker, netweaver. You only need a small number of people who both network and netweave to create a revolution in your business. They will evangelize on your behalf, and you will attract more clients than you can reasonably manage.
Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to this channel and be notified every single time a new video goes live. Don't miss out on any of the weekly interviews that I have with top business leaders, sometimes Fortune 500 executives. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications.